Welcome to Lorien Live. We're so happy to have you here today. And I am joined by Katherine, Tarazona, and we are here to talk about navigating the UX UI job market, getting insights and expert pro tips for success. So, welcome, Katherine. It's so good to have you with me here today.
Hi, Chelyn. Thank you so much for having me, just giving me this opportunity to speak about UI UX opportunities. And hopefully I can give some good insights to some of these, candidates and professionals that are listening today.
Excellent. And for those of you joining us live, please let us know where you are joining from around the world. We're so happy to have you here. If you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the comments. And if you're watching the replay, we will come back and visit. And please feel free to connect with Katherine or I here on LinkedIn as well. And Katherine, I'd love for you to share just a little bit about your story. How did you get into technical recruiting and get particularly excited about the UX UI space?
Definitely. I actually don't come from any type of corporate business background at all. I have a background in biology and a healthcare background as well. I worked at a doctor's office for a good while after I graduated college, and I shifted into the recruiting space whenever I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, about a year and a half ago. So I've been recruiting with Lorien for a good while now. Actually, a few months after I started with Lorien, I worked on my first UX role. And it kind of has just spiraled since then. It was something that I really fell in love with. I really enjoy speaking with the candidates and getting to walk through their portfolios, really see what people have had a hands-on difference in making a digital product or working with a company to make an experience better for users. It's such an exciting space to be in, and it's definitely changing every day. So I'm very lucky to be able to work in this space.
And we've certainly seen a lot of changes over the last several years. What would you say has been what stood out to you in terms of the IT landscape, particularly in the UX UI space?
Definitely. Well, as far as I feel like a lot of people have changed as far as, since COVID. We've definitely made a shift from working in person to working remotely. And that has a huge impact in the design space. A lot of times when you're working on projects with people, you have to do design sprints or whiteboarding or creating user stories, sketching. A lot of these things, people used to do them in person. And so we've really had to adapt and learn how to do this in a remote environment. So it's been very interesting to see that shift in the industry itself, but also just seeing over the past 6 months how many positions have come out in UX is incredible. A lot of companies are really diving in to expand their teams or to bring in experts that can help, just improve their digital products, whether that be their website or an application. It's really an interesting thing to see. And I've seen anything from designers to researchers to architects, even content specialists, and I'm very happy that I'm able to work with those people.
What do you see as driving that demand? So at a time where there are layoffs and there's a little
Mhm.
bit of a more challenging time right now, there continues to be demand in the UX UI space. What do you think's really driving that?
Yeah, I think good user experience definitely helps businesses be successful. A lot of times, if you have bad user experience, your user won't come back to that product. So when you're in this world today where there's just so much volume, there's so much overwhelming products that are coming out every day. You hear about new applications that, oh, this will change your life. It's the best one yet. You really need to pay attention to your user and their experience as well as the interface that you're promoting. And companies have really, they see that push that people want better and they want more, and they're really taking that and running with it. It's very exciting to see.
Like that consumer patience for delay in this area is over. We have
Yeah.
expectations, and there's enough competitors bringing it to market that it's just such a demand.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing you said recently was to view the job descriptions more as a wish list. And for many people in this profession, it's difficult because job descriptions, job titles, they really run the gamut.
Yeah.
And what kind of advice do you
Mhm.
give people around approaching the job descriptions and job titles?
Yeah, absolutely. I really look at a job description. And of course, since I am able to dissect them as a recruiter, I think it's a little bit easier to help people understand that, they might be qualified for a position without really knowing it. And that's why I really definitely say that use a job description as a wish list. You really can look at something and say, maybe I'm not qualified for this. I don't have X, Y, and Z, but user experience has a lot of transferable skills. There's not just hard skills that you need to know, there's soft skills. You need to be a good problem solver, you need to be creative, you need to be able to take criticism and run with it and, be able to make something beautiful for people. And it's a very interesting thing to see as far as, when some people might not be confident in themselves, it's one of those things where I can, be that advocate and I can show them that, yes, you do have the skills for it, even if you might not think that you do. A lot of people, they take, courses and different design boot camps, and that's really how they get into this space. But you have to have the passion and the soft skills behind it in order to really be successful.
It's a unique job, as a profession, just in having that technical side and the
Mhm.
opportunities to interact with highly technical people and that design creative thinking. As
Right.
you talk to candidates and spend time here, what types of people do you see most often that stay within the UX UI space and really are continuing to progress professionally?
Yeah, I see a lot of marketing. I see a lot of graphic design, also web developments. People are multifaceted. You can want to specialize in UX and then go to different aspects. So, marketing teams, they have UX specialists that can help out with those aspects that they don't really know about. And you can really be that advocate in this space to help others learn. I think that's a really interesting thing too. But as far as, the different avenues that people take, I've seen people come from different industries and really just dive into UX because it, makes the most sense for their next step, or it's just something that they're really interested in. And I think taking different things from your past experiences and applying it to your new experience is something that people are starting to realize that you can do that, making a change in your career.
I've found that the topic of education, degrees, really specific experience versus skill-based hiring, that is a topic in the STEM
Mhm.
and just, across the board. And
It
there's a
is.
lot of, challenge with that. And a lot of people that are maybe further along in their career, hiring managers that have a bit more of the old school thinking around you just
Mhm.
must have these degrees. But it seems like more and more there's an openness to non-traditional backgrounds, and certainly the just requirement that we diversify our tech teams. This is so important. But what would you say about having a non-traditional background, making a pivot? What are ways that people should think about it? How might they approach it in terms of
Mhm.
sharing their story and connecting it back to an opportunity in the UX UI?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that so many people are starting to make a shift to UX. You think about people who've been in careers for maybe, 10, 15, 20 years, and they decide that this is something that they really want to do. A lot of times nowadays, hiring managers are very open to that and they see the value in people's career shifts. Uh, Definitely, if you're someone who's a little bit more junior or maybe just starting out, younger in your career as well, you can take these design boot camps, you can go to these courses and learn as much as you can. I absolutely advocate for that, as well as just being open to have a conversation and network with people. Definitely, not being afraid to reach out and say, would you be my mentor? You've been in this space. I'm a little bit newer, but I want to get as good as I can. And I think just the fact that the world that we live in today is more so adapting to that, you know, inclusivity really is really cool. A lot of people maybe they didn't have access to higher education back in the day for whatever reason. And a lot of times people, maybe they're like single moms, or they didn't have time to go through that process back in the day, or maybe they're working a full-time job and they can only take courses at night. There's a lot of flexibility that comes with being able to take these boot camps and being able to come into an industry where maybe you didn't have access to that before.
Knowing what you know now and getting feedback from hiring managers related to boot camps or other types of non-traditional learning, do you have any thoughts around how someone could evaluate whether or not a particular opportunity is worthwhile or is going to have value for somebody in terms of getting them hired?
Sure. I think that a lot of times the courses that people tend to follow are the most popular ones. You hear about it on social media, or you get an advertisement on it, on your phone, and they would take it in, they run with it, and they go into that process. I think there's nothing wrong with that. Whatever you have access to is the best way to better yourself. If you might, just have books, or you might be open to listen to podcasts or watching YouTube videos on how to use a certain software. Just being open to that avenue and taking it, and just being able to, really apply your skills in that area. There's nothing wrong with that. And when you're looking at these job descriptions and you might think, oh, I don't know if I have the years of experience. I actually placed someone who had 3 years of experience at a small company. He was working as a UX designer, but he actually got a Google Coursera certificate in February of last year. Well, 4 months later, he had a direct hire position as a lead UX architect. I mean, I feel like there's not a better success story than that, right?
Absolutely. And aside from let's say the coursework and really leaning into that, being willing to spend the time to,
Mhm.
take that and sort of prove that you've got that education. What did he bring to the process that helped him stand out and made it worth them, making an offer and maybe, taking a bit of a risk of hiring someone that
Yeah.
didn't have the same kind of educational background as that others?
Absolutely. He was just able to really talk about what he had done. I think that is the hardest thing nowadays, is just being able to really apply the things that you've done to, your current opportunity or the new opportunity that you're looking at. He was able to really talk through the projects that he'd worked on. And I was able to kind of be that person as well, to say, hey, that's pretty similar to this company. The background was that he was coming from a similar industry. That's not always the case, but it doesn't hurt either. And so I was able to, research the company that we were working with, the company that he had previously worked with, and really form a link between those two. And I think that made a big difference. Definitely, if you're in that environment where you're not quite sure how to make the connections, that's where recruiters can really come in. And we do this all day, every day, so we can be that person to really show hiring managers where that connection is and why this person is the best person to take a chance on.
Absolutely. And I know that you have recommended the um, putting together a portfolio and making sure that
Mhm.
people can. It's such a visual job, or elements of
Yeah.
it can be so visual. How do you suggest that people go about having a portfolio that is really valuable?
Yes. Oh gosh, I could talk about this all day, but I really think that just taking the time to build out your portfolio based on who you are. Your portfolio shows a lot about who you are as a person. It shows your personality. It shows the awesome projects you've been able to work on. And I like to tell people that you need to pay as much as attention to your portfolio as you will working on a client's product. It can be very time consuming. It's not an easy project at all, but as humans, we evolve all the time. We change. We like certain things sometimes, then we might like a certain other thing. just being very adaptable and kind of incorporating that into your daily, or, maybe on Saturday, hey, I'm going to update my portfolio and add a certain piece in, or talk a little bit more about this case study here. It's ever evolving, and being able to work on your portfolio and really showcase that is so important. I would definitely say another aspect is having at least 3 projects, and really kind of taking a look at things and saying, are these versatile projects? Am I talking about all of the same thing? Where can I kind of show that multifaceted, personality, and where I really shine? I think that can be so helpful when hiring managers are looking through. I always send a portfolio with a candidate when I can, and if they have one, of course. And I know that they look through them too. So, definitely taking the time to focus on that is a huge game changer.
Fantastic. And I know one strategy that people don't realize is that you can turn on the featured section in your LinkedIn profile and actually
Right.
attach your portfolio, or even record using something like Loom, and record a a review of your portfolio and attach it there. So there's some really good ways to leverage the time and energy that have gone into these portfolios.
Yes, and I always look for a portfolio. So any professionals out there like listening and kind of watching along, if I'm looking at your profile, I scroll all the way down and I look for a linked portfolio, or I looked at the feature page. That is the first thing that people want to see when they're looking at you, and if they want to have a conversation in terms of hiring managers, uh, absolutely add that in, and build out that profile as much as you can.
Perfect. And we have a couple of great questions. So thank you for those of you that are adding them to the chat. So Terry asks, are you finding this is kind of a young person's game, or are you finding that experienced designers are becoming more desirable?
I would say it's truly a mix. I mean, I don't think for any reason that it's necessarily a young person's game. I think it's all inclusive. I think that's the best way to really answer that question, because I talk to designers who have been doing this for 20 years, and, they might be a manager right now, but they're looking to do that hands on nitty gritty work that they really fell in love with, and that they wanted to do, and why they came into this industry. And at the same time, I've talked to young professionals who are ambitious, and they really want to make the biggest difference they can, as well as mentoring junior level designers. So it's really a mix. It's really as involved as you want to be, and hiring managers are very open to both ends.
I really enjoyed a conversation we had yesterday preparing for today, and it was around, you and I are in different stages in our careers, and most of the time during a hiring process, you're going to interview with people who are different generations, different stages, and leaning into where your strengths are naturally is going to be such a
Yes.
great thing. But also remembering that you might have somebody that's going to speak to what they perceive as a weakness. So being proactive and showing that
Mhm.
if you're earlier in your career and you can be seen in a certain way, that you also want to be able to demonstrate that ability to be part of leading a team, and
Mhm.
being really tapping into experience. If you're someone who's been in the game for a long time and maybe not into some of the more current things, that you can take the chance to demonstrate that. And we had a conversation around TikTok, and my admitting that I viewed it as much more kind of fun and didn't realize how powerful it is in terms of getting really quick, incredible information and curating your interests, including
Mhm.
UX UI. But what kind of insight do you have around that topic of building a network, being
Mhm.
very versatile, and being perceived in a way that you could fit into a team and be a culture add, so to speak?
Absolutely. To answer, I would say the first part of your question, kind of fitting in, owning where you're at in your career, owning where you're at in your knowledge base as well. There is nothing wrong with saying, I really don't know much about that. let me go back, let me learn about this, let me research, let me find out what the heck this is all about. That gives you a certain level of confidence in knowing that you're not just saying, hey, I know everything, when you really don't. It's doing much more of a disservice to yourself to say those things when you don't know what's happening, because you're really not able to have those deep conversations that are really required in, in UX. I mean, the different types of people that you're talking to every day, the different team members, if you might be, discussing with a researcher or maybe discussing with a developer, saying, hey, I don't really know much about the research process. How did you find out that users like this? Or how did you really develop this area of our application and this feature that we're looking to add? Where's the disconnect between these industries? And there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, you know more than me. Can you teach me? And then kind of diving into a little bit of, how you can learn and what resources you can go to. I absolutely say, whatever you like to do, use that. If you like to read about it, have email newsletters be sent to you from the UX Collective or General Assembly or whatever, program or thought leader you really enjoy. Read about it. If you are more so of a visual person like myself, watch TikTok, watch YouTube, listen to a podcast if you're an audio learner. There's so many different avenues. And talking a little bit about what we spoke about yesterday with TikTok is that you can find very digestible information on these platforms, even though if it seems a little bit scary to kind of, go into those applications and really dive into them. You curate your page based on what you enjoy. So if you're into UX, you want to watch design challenges or portfolio reviews like me, you're going to have UX stuff pop up on your page. And it's very quick. It's a good way to say, hey, at the end of the day, when I'm looking through, I'm still doing something for myself. I'm still continuously learning and just trying to, improve whatever I can for myself.
Excellent. And so Riley had a great question, and it's, are there any good networking events or opportunities kind of remotely that getting plugged in and getting connected into communities? What have you found valuable and what have you heard from other candidates?
Absolutely. I see so many groups on LinkedIn, of course, and I'm just going to say that because it's true. On LinkedIn, if you just search user experience, there's like thousands, gosh, tens of thousands of groups that you can join that have people that are of like minds. They have things to share. A lot of times they'll post jobs in there. They'll also post maybe articles or open source projects that you can really collaborate on. It's a really cool resource. And also just being open to having those conversations with candidates. In terms of myself, I've had candidates say, hey, I'm not really looking for an opportunity, but I have this club that gets together every, third Saturday or something. I can't exactly remember, but we talk about UX research and we just get together and have coffee and, have conversations. And I thought that was one of the coolest things because the candidate asked me if I wanted to come. And I was like, wow, and something you don't really think about, but people are doing these things all of the time. And just being open to them, put yourself in the conversations, groups if you can, just be available to, be open to a network.
I think that comment about curating the feed is so valuable, that just spending a couple of days, even over a weekend if needed, and follow the thought leaders and the companies and groups that are in the UX UI, you're going to start getting so much rich information and events that are going on, opportunities for networking, jobs. It will just start feeding you things from places you would have never known about. So it's really worth the time.
And it's not an overwhelming amount of information either. I think that's what can kind of deter people at first. If you search, user experience on Google, you're going to get 10,000 pages about, articles you can read, job post links, X, Y, and Z. But if you, go to the space that you're comfortable in and just take that information as it comes, it's a lot easier to, be continuously learning and improving on, your skills, especially if you're a young professional trying to get better at what you want to do.
Absolutely. And I don't think I wasn't in this industry until more recently, so I didn't know anything about the LinkedIn recruiter system and how
Mhm.
hiring managers and recruiters even search for candidates, or how, what happened behind the scenes. And it was so interesting to learn about the fact that who you are connected with, who you're following, what
Mhm.
companies, all of that really matters. So as a recruiter,
It
when you're
does.
searching, that's how LinkedIn is bringing people forward for you to consider. So it really is worth the time. I think sometimes it's hard to think through, where do I spend my time and what's going to be valuable, but
Mhm.
investing that bit of time in LinkedIn and optimizing and getting connected can be helpful. Do you give any particular advice to candidates around leveraging LinkedIn specifically?
Sure. I think, I'm not the best at it, but I think I also have not come from this industry, so I've had to learn similar to you. I've had to learn about LinkedIn, and I think as far as kind of advice that I would give is just be open to reaching out to people. Don't be afraid to send a message to someone just because they don't know you. That's how you can really find the best people in your network and the people that will continually advocate for you, send you new positions if it might be something that you're interested in. Just have candid conversations with people and really own what you're looking for and who you are as a person, and bring your best self to the table. That's so important when you're building your network. And when I started recruiting on UI UX, I had probably zero, designers in my network. And so I've been building up my candidates that I've been talking to and just staying in touch every so often. And it's really interesting to see, how that relationship can evolve when you're open to being there and, open to getting on the phone and talking.
One thing I noticed just doing some coaching and one-on-one is how distressing it is to people when they feel ghosted, or they sent out a message and they
Yeah.
didn't say anything, and it kind of stops them from doing it again. And I think you and I and have the type of job that we get used to that, right? Of
Mhm.
there's some activity in numbers and you hear no, and it's just part of it. But
Mhm.
I think encouraging everyone to just be open to the idea that it's not personal. It really isn't,
Yeah,
and to just keep going. And what advice do you have for folks that are just, it's a grind, right? The
it
job search can
is.
become a grind, and maintaining positive outlook and good energy is so important. But what have you done personally, and what advice have you given to candidates
Mhm.
that you work with?
Yes, it can be very disheartening, when you keep hearing no over and over again. I see it all the time. Also, when, people are unfortunately laid off, because we've had a lot of that over the past couple of months and the past year. It can be very discouraging to see that. And especially as a candidate, we recruiters, we see that, we understand that. Things that I do usually is, of course, I like to tell people, I see this all the time. I talk to people all day, every day. It's so unfortunate, but at least, this is one door closing and another door opening. Luckily, in the UX space, there's so many opportunities out there. And that's something that, that's my relationship to candidates. I'm there to be an advocate, be a friend, be a cheerleader, and push opportunities their way. Often, even if an opportunity might not work out with a certain company, I pass along their resume and I say, hey, this opportunity just came out. Would you be interested in this instead? And I just keep that relationship going. And I think that's the most important thing, is just being open to new opportunities, even if it might not have been the first one that we've worked on together, because there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe it just wasn't the right fit. So
Absolutely. And I think having access to that expert advice, resources, and just spending your time where it matters. You
yeah.
recently had this week a blog post shared on the Lorien blog, and the QR code on the screen right now will take those of you watching directly to it. And why don't you share a little bit about the resources that are available there and why you selected those items?
Definitely, definitely. I think that there's a lot of good resources on there, which I'll kind of dive into. But first of all, for senior level designers, senior level UX people versus younger professionals that are looking to get into this space, there's a dedicated hiring guide that you can kind of, if you don't know where to start, that's a great place. It has a lot of good information and a lot of good steps to take if you have no idea where to go from there. I also definitely think there's a lot of good softwares and programs and things on there, which, if you're not in the UI UX space, you might not think to learn about, but that can at least point you in the right direction to start watching and start reading about that. And, not being afraid to teach yourself something when it's right there. As far as kind of, further down along the line, I think there's a lot of different, I would say like kind of buzzwords in the design space that if you're not in the industry, again, they're very helpful to just learn a little bit more. You can do that research on, your on the back end of things and say, what the heck is customer experience? What is information architecture? I've never heard of this before. And just familiarize yourself with the different aspects of UX because it can be daunting when you're coming in or when you're, making a career shift and trying to get into a space that is so, I would say, all encompassing, really. It's very vast, it's very intricate. There's a lot of different aspects that you might not be an expert in, but you also do the job. So there's a lot on there, and I would definitely say don't be afraid to reach out to me as well, and we can kind of walk through things and go through that as well.
What would you say about prepping a resume for a particular opportunity? So someone's done the networking now,
Yeah.
they've found this opportunity, they're applying, their resume doesn't quite match up. What recommendations do you have to just make every opportunity and increase your odds of being selected for an interview?
100% put your projects on your resume. I think people kind of shy away from having too long of a resume or too short of a resume. Absolutely fill in the details. I mean, hiring managers, recruiters, they're looking at your resume, they're seeing what you've done. But if there's not really much there to show the projects that you've worked on, it can be a little bit hard to really tell who you are as a designer and where you really shine. I feel like in terms of programs and your design process, those are great things to add. But talk about was I working on a homepage redesign for a website? Was I adding a new feature to the mobile application? Was I working on a dashboard? Was I working on a customer portal or a live chat feature? Just kind of getting into the nitty gritty. I wouldn't be afraid to put those on your resume, and the more to you, you should be bragging about yourself because you put in the work, you put in the effort to do these projects, and you want to be able to showcase them as much as you can.
Absolutely. It's definitely the time to be bold and to be
Yeah.
proud. Absolutely. Okay, so now let's move on to their resume that they tweak to be just right is selected and they're being called in for an interview. How do you recommend candidates prepare for the interview in general, but also that technical side specifically?
Yeah. Yeah. Just knowing what you've done can be so helpful, especially when you're going into these technical interviews and you might have a portfolio presentation or you might have a design challenge. Being able to really talk through your process, talk through what you've done, why you did it, not just jumping to the end. I think a lot of candidates, especially if you've kind of been in the industry for a little bit longer, they might try to overlook different aspects of their process because it might be, inherently, something that just happens when you're designing, but not being afraid to, go through everything in depth and really show in detail what you've been able to do and why you did it that way. That's what hiring managers are looking for. And I like to say it's as if you're in first grade and your teacher is saying, hey, on this test, act as if I'm not from this planet, I'm not from this world, I'm an alien that knows nothing, and tell me about it. Tell me everything you know, because you want to be able to show absolutely where you've made an impact, and they see that process and they say, hey, I want that person on my team, you know?
Yes. Okay, that is incredible advice. And now, kind of the last stage of the process. So, out in the interview, there you're receiving an offer. What do you recommend that people do at that point when they receive an offer? What should they do next? Where do you see missteps, and then where do you see people really shine and end up in the best position possible?
Yeah, I see a lot of missteps where I guess this is something on the recruiting end where you don't really focus necessarily on the project at hand. UX professionals are very passionate, they're very creative, they like to do things that make them stick out against the crowd. And sometimes the project makes a whole lot more sense versus maybe compensation or maybe contract versus full time. There's a lot of aspects that you can think about when it comes to finding the perfect role or the perfect new position for someone. And those things can often be overlooked. So definitely when when you have an offer, I like to tell candidates, hey, let's walk through this. Let's make sure the commute makes sense. Let's make sure that you like the environment that you're working in. Did you talk about team dynamic? Did you talk about ways to be successful moving forward in this team? Are there opportunities for growth? There's a lot of conversation that needs to happen when you have that offer in hand. And also, talk to your family, talk to your friends, talk to people that really know you. I always tell candidates, if you're not really sure right now, talk to your best friend about it because they know you. They know if this is something that you're really excited about, or maybe there's something else that's kind of pushing you to take this. And it might not be the right thing for you, but they'll have that conversation with you candidly as I will. I just like to say, when you're building that relationship, not being afraid to really take either, what makes the most sense for you in terms of creative, passions, or what makes the most sense, financially or what have you. There's a lot of factors that go into it, and those are missteps that can often be overlooked.
Oh, so much great advice. Katherine, I've had such a great time sharing all of these tips and hearing from you. And I know this whole industry in the UX UI is growing and exciting.
Mhm.
And although there are some headwinds right now, there are so many opportunities. And I encourage all of you to reach out to both of us. Definitely connect with
Absolutely.
Katherine. The slide at the end as we wrap today will actually have her email address and how you can best connect with her, in addition to LinkedIn, of course. So, Katherine, thank you again. We so appreciate your energy and excitement about it, and we'll look forward to having another Lorien live with you in the future. So thank you all for joining us. We appreciate that you invested the time, and we will be having these sessions regularly.
Yes, thank you so much, Chelyn, and everyone. Please feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to connect with me, of course, and let me be your cheerleader. Let me be your advocate.
Absolutely. All right. Goodbye for now.